All right. Thank you so much, Daryl. I appreciate the introduction and good to see you guys this evening. We'll run through a quick sound check on this end. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's webinar. Good afternoon, Bo. Clarity, good to see you guys. Thank you, Lorna. Tonight's broadcast, titled How to Find the Best Options Trades with this Proven Magic Market Map. My name is Henry Gamble, and I'd like to thank you for being here and taking the time to invest in yourself and to learn something about trading. I have been an avid trader for a little more than 13 years, and I've been fortunate to have several excellent mentors along the way. One of the most helpful is tonight's co-host, David Starr, the creator of the Voodoo lines. David and I have spent the past year or more working together to create a system for trading options around these levels of support and resistance. The Voodoo lines can be thought of as a map for price charts. We have a destination in mind, and along the way, we may stop here or here. We may find a bridge to cross there, but we have a good overall idea of where we are and where we're headed. With this map in front of us, we can begin to structure option spreads to take advantage of a myriad of situations. The Voodoo lines are comprised of 5 primary components: the fire line, the tree line, snow line, and sky line, and then the moguls. Each of them come with their own characteristics and nuances that when applied diligently can yield extraordinary results. Extraordinary results like what we're going to be showing you tonight, where you can sell directional options directly into the high of the move, where you can pick up entries near the low, where you can structure theta positive spreads and have short strikes that are never tested. All of this is possible with this revolutionary study set. Take, for example, this trade in Caterpillar. This has been in play here lately, and this is my exit from a trade that we'll be discussing a little later this evening. This image was taken at the end of the day, and you can see that my fill price is at the dead high of the session. Fast forward to where we are now. These are still the best prices that the $220 calls, the 200s, I had both, they are the highest prices that they've traded for. We sold at the highs, and to this day, and I dare to say, for the rest of this contract's life, those prices will not be tested again. So we were the sale up there at 27, and looking how these closed today, you can see the incredible power of this indicator. And how about the moves in GameStop? Have any of you been trading GameStop? This stock gained a huge amount of attention after the initial Wall Street's bets squeeze, and it was in play again during the 3rd week in May. This setup is one of my absolute favorites, and it's something that David and I will be teaching you how to identify. I played the move with 2 different strike prices, and over the course of about a week, was able to more than triple each of them. Shown on the chart initially, but then you can actually see the transactions of picking these up, buying the $200 calls for around $22, and then we were able to sell those for $74, and then picking up the 250s for $13 and flipping those at $48. This is the kind of precision you can have by learning the setups that the Voodoo lines map out. It's an excellent way to study charts, and when applied correctly, it will bring a distinct edge to your trading. But before we get into all the details of this analysis, I'd like to take a minute to introduce myself and David. Again, my name is Henry Gamble. I feel like this is a relatively accurate depiction. It always makes me laugh at least a little bit. But I've been a part of Simpler Trading for more than a decade and trading stocks since 2007. I met John Carter about 13 years ago doing a service call through the Geek Squad, right? The Best Buy home computer division. After dozens of service calls and ultimately spending more time working for him than I did at Best Buy, he suggested that I come on as a full-time employee. He knew that I had a background in gambling, mostly through Texas Hold'em, and he also knew that I'd been working to grow a small stock account through Scottrade. With that, I took the job and began what would be the journey of a lifetime. One of my favorite stories to tell is the one about my IAG trade. I've been working with John for a couple of months and logging into his TradeStation account under his demo side so I could learn the platform. I believe this was a Friday when all of this happened. You know, I've been trading real small, real conservative in this demo account, and I sit down today and think, today is the day. I'm going to make something happen. So, I thought I had logged into his demo account and proceeded to place the entire account into IAG shares at the market. I've had to copy and paste this image a few times over the years, but here you can see the purchase of 61,800 shares of IAG about an hour into the cash session. You can see it with a slightly more detailed view here. This is a 1-minute chart, and right about the 9:30 Central mark, you can see the largest volume spike of the day. That was me, and what I guess you might call my version of the 80s classic movie War Games. As it went, I placed this trade and then began setting up John's new home theater system. He had bought some new Klipsch speakers and a new TV so we could watch Harry Potter on Blu-ray during the trading day because, of course, we all know you don't want to watch the news. It wasn't until several hours later when he called me over to his desk having figured out what I had done. After recovering from the sinking feeling that only risking $1 million that isn't yours can provide, we began scaling out of the position. Ultimately, we were able to pocket about $34,000. So I always take a moment of gratitude when I tell this story because I am incredibly thankful that, that trade did work out. It seems so easy to talk about now, but when you're brand new coming as a PC tech to work for a guy like John and you realize you just did that with his whole account, I'm fortunate to be sitting here giving you this story and not a different story or who knows how it could have turned out otherwise. But that was a very transformational period in my life. And it was right about the same time that I began reading The Alchemist. And I discovered the quote, "When you truly want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it." That probably has something to do with where I am now as a husband and a father. The last time I spoke to you guys in these webinars, Will wasn't quite here yet. He's now almost a year old, and Mandy and I couldn't be more thankful. So those are some fun stories about me, kind of how I got to where I am and came to know the group that I'm with. Now let's talk a little bit about how I came to know David. David is the mastermind behind the Voodoo lines. I have had the privilege of knowing him for many years now, and our story begins at one of our Austin mentorships back in 2011. David had developed an indicator that he felt would complement John's trading and wanted to share it with us. From there, John and I began to review the analysis that David had provided and found it surprisingly accurate upon initial review. Further investigation yielded exceptional results, and the two of us, myself especially, have really become devoted followers of the Voodoo lines. With that, I would like to turn things over to the creator, and David can tell you a little bit about who he is and how he's been leveraging this study set in the current market.
Hey, thanks, Henry, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. As I go through some tech stuff, switching over to my screens, and a couple of questions about whether this is a recording. No, this is live. This is an encore presentation of last week's webinar, but it is not a recording and it is not a repeat. We definitely have some new and exciting things to tell you as we go through, as well as a review of some of the most interesting parts from last week that a lot of you told us that you were showing up to hear again. So, and hey, the market is different this week than last week, and in a week, this has been a lot of, I don't know, what do you guys think? Easy trading this last week? Tricky trading this last week? How has it been for you all? And I don't know if you noticed, yeah, Chris says the market is on crack, and it very well may be. It might be a really special kind of crack. And yeah, Sean says insane. I don't know if I can pronounce it the way he wrote it, but yeah, I'm with I'm with you, folks. And did you notice? I don't know if you noticed, but a new all-time high today at in the S&P 500, and an interesting all-time high. We're going to look at it with the Voodoo lines in a little bit, and you can tell me when you see it whether it might have helped. It certainly. It certainly helped me. Yeah, Eric's saying we got that all-time high and then pulled back. And that's a kind of crazy. I mean, in the past week, we've had at least 3 gaps to the upside, which have just totally killed folks who trash stuff. And I want to look at that with you in a little bit, because I think you'll find it's pretty interesting. But we'll get there in a second. Like I said, we're going to dig into this because there's some new and interesting stuff. For those of you who are here for the second time, you guys already know that guy on this screen behind the wrestling mask is Mr. John Carter himself. And of course, now everyone here joining us for the first time today knows that as well. And of course, there's Henry. That's just the side of my head from when, just about 2 years ago, practically to the day, when we were down in Grand Cayman, all trading together. I like to keep this little picture on my screen, just reminding me that, when we weren't all together in the same place, which was a lot of the time, Henry and I would coordinate our trades through Yahoo Messenger. That's how long ago it was. But whether we were online, in person, on the phone, one thing which has remained consistent over all those years is that during that time, Henry and I kept working on a methodology to use options trades in a way which takes advantage of systematic price movements between Voodoo lines. And if you've taken any of the trades we've shared in our trading rooms, you probably already have been using our method, perhaps without using it, because it's how we plan out and execute our own trades. And a little over a year ago, we decided that that system was finally comprehensive enough to document it, share it with you all. And I want to take a look at those and the new exciting stuff we have to tell you in just a second. But for those of you who don't know me, let's go ahead and I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Trading is my third career. I started off in technology all the way back in junior high school. I was building software for local businesses, mostly small businesses. I mean, you wouldn't imagine a Fortune 500 company hiring that guy to build software to help their business run, but there were folks who did, and I started investing not long after, because I took the money I made and I put it to work for me in the markets. And I continued to be an active investor through most of my career. A career that started or continued after college with me working for CompuServe, part of the small group that developed their flagship forum product. And then I ran product development for a wireless company where I was awarded several patents for technology which is in virtually every smartphone, and therefore likely the one you use. Went on to be chief technology officer of a few companies, one of which was one of the largest websites on the planet. And my second career, management consulting. I started my own practice after getting my MBA, graduating as class valedictorian. And that's also when I started trading instead of just investing. Most of my consulting work was running large strategic projects lasting 6 months, a year, sometimes more. And there wasn't always a new project lined up when another was ending. So trading became a great way for me to earn income while I was out there also doing business development, looking for the next gig. The trading, it wasn't so great at first, however, and maybe, I don't know, some of you may have found that as well, that when you first got started with trading, it wasn't as easy as you thought it was going to be. In my case, it's because I was fooled into thinking that I knew everything I needed to about trading. I mean, I said to myself, I already know how to invest. I've been doing this forever and I've been pretty good at it, right? The MBA curriculum, which I pretty much excelled at, right? During that, I studied all sorts of, things about markets, complex futures, complex option strategies. I created some pretty intricate options valuation models that several of my professors, I believe, are still using, right? So I'm thinking I know this stuff. And then, I go on to see these ads on TV, the ones, right? From the folks who make trading platforms, either to sell independently or from brokerages. And they show folks sitting behind a gazillion monitors filled with charts and graphs. And you probably gathered I'm kind of a math and quant geek. Charts and graphs, that's where I live, right? All this stuff is telling me, look, trading, yeah, that's something you know how to do. But what they don't show you and what they don't tell you is that trading is far more about psychology than it is about math, right? But once I figured it out, I went and took those same technology skills, those same creativity skills, the same innovation skills, which had served me so well in my prior careers, and put them to use in building tools like Voodoo lines, which could combine the math and the psychology and use it to pinpoint important levels. And once I started to use those, my trading became more consistent. And all of that started to come together about the time I found myself as a single parent, 2 kids who needed me at home. And with the trading stuff finally figured out, it was a pretty darn easy decision to wind down my consulting practice and trade full time. And so in that way, Voodoo Lines was one of the tools which made a difference not only for my trading, but also my quality of life. And when you combine the tool with the strategies that Henry and I have developed, you can use the Voodoo lines in your trading too. So let's go ahead and look at some of those trades and how the strategies using them have played out. And I think you'll see why we're so excited to finally be able to share them with you, and also excited to show you what's on this chart, because there are 2 things here that I know a bunch of you have been asking about. The first is what you see here. This is a chart of Bitcoin, right, with the Voodoo lines. Now, those of you who know and use the Voodoo lines, you know what they are. We're going to talk more about these levels in a little bit. For those of you who are seeing them for the first time, but these red lines, or this red line, there are a few more, but they're usually pretty far apart. So you don't always see several of them on the same chart. They are the most important of the levels, and these tree lines also relatively rare, the second most important level. So when price, right, in Bitcoin, I mean, look, this dropped this precipitously in one day. This is a pretty dramatic move, right? Once it got through the support of this fire line, it was just, right, Katie bar the door, right? It was... We're going down, Captain. Right, something like that. Sorry, I just had to use the soundboard with the way this thing fell, right? But where did it stop? Right at that tree line, right? So that's why it's exciting to have these levels for you in Bitcoin. A few of you, you've seen them before because I've posted them in the chat rooms for y'all, right? But what did it do? Bounce right from there. One of these most significant, the second most significant of the Voodoo line levels. And that's right, holding support, which didn't surprise me in the least. Not that I was expecting it. The way we trade these is we wait and let the market show us what it was going to do. But by bouncing so dramatically here, Bitcoin showed me that it was willing to at least in the short term, observe support and told me to look for setups to find support at other Voodoo line levels. And that's why I bought right here, right? Just off this little skyline, right, up to this little snow line. Again, we'll talk more about these levels later. I am not regularly, right, a Bitcoin day trader. And this trade, right, I actually took it here in the micro Bitcoin futures pretty much right after they were released. This is what I do, right, with lots of products. There's a new product out there. I'm going to test it out. I'm going to see how it works, whether it was, trading the micro ES and the micro NASDAQ literally within hours of when they started trading, because I wanted to see how liquid are they? How well do they track to the larger products, those sorts of things, right? That's how I can learn about them. That's how I can help other people trade them as well. And I was doing the same thing with the micro Bitcoin futures. And so of course I'm going to bring up, right, the Voodoo lines, because that way I just get to sit here and I have to wait a few hours to find my setup, right? But get in, get out. Did it continue up? Yeah, but I would have had to, if I got in down here and out here, right, even if it went up higher, do I want to stay in through this pullback to get another skyline? No, take my profit, get back in at the skyline if I want to, right? That's the systematic movement we're going to be talking about in a little bit, right? So, right, and it's as I said, one of the things that I'm excited to tell you about, because while we've had these levels before, relatively few of the platforms that Voodoo lines have been available on have spot crypto, and TradingView is one of them. And now that we have Voodoo lines for TradingView, which oh my gosh, I can see how excited you all are as well to have it available. So yeah, just with the comments. So I am very glad to have that for you, right? So so switching over to take a look at Ethereum, right? More crypto still on TradingView. I mean, wouldn't you agree that it would be useful to know where this all-important fire line was down here as support, right? One that ran into this fire line for a brief pause, right? But I mean, wouldn't you agree that if you could know ahead of time that this level up here was sitting here and that it was an extremely important level that could be resistance if you were trading Ethereum, I mean, do you think that could have helped you? Right? That's why even before TradingView had these for everybody, I was posting these levels for folks in chat. Whether you're a Voodoo line user who was on, Toss or a platform that didn't have them or not, just so you could know these levels in advance. But now you don't have to just rely on catching my posts in chat, right? With these levels on TradingView and available, anybody can get these, right? Because just about everybody can use TradingView. And so, look, let's take this forward to the S&P 500, just so I can catch you up on some of the things that we were talking about on the S&P 500. Sorry, I'm just reading what Eric's saying. saying, man, Voodoo lines on TradingView is game changing. Don't have to deal with the toss slowness. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the other reasons why it is so great to have these is, look, we know what happens at, if it's a busy day and it's, at the open, everybody's scrambling to do something. We know what happens to toss, right? We love it for options, and there's a lot of charting stuff that it does great. But just to know that you can have some backup to see these lines when you need to, it's fantastic. And yeah, for everyone who's asking how you get them, we will talk to you about that when we get to the Q&A. But yeah, it'll be available to everybody who has the Voodoo lines, no problem at all. Right. So back to this S&P 500 trade. This is the one we were talking about last week or not trade, but campaign of multiple trades, right? The bullish one that started back here on March 25th. And I just want to bring you up to date because last week we talked about the first part of the campaign, riding the S&P 500 up into what before today was the previous all-time high back here in May, taking our profits on, literally, right, getting in on the day that it turned back up after this decline, getting out, right, booking the last of the profits literally on the day of this May all-time high, right, being out, to ride this down to the low, and then the second part of the campaign to ride it back up again. That's the part we covered last week, right? And last week, we also talked about how it was these precise levels that allowed us to do that, right? A combination of both the Voodoo lines and the strategies around trading them, right? That we're going to be talking to you about, right? So when we were here last week, we stepped through the trades one by one. We're not going to do that tonight, right? We stepped through each of the trades one by one, got to the per contract totals where that campaign was last week. But like I said, let's not step through them all one by one. We'll do some new trades. We will step through, however, the price action that led to us getting in, because for everyone who's seeing this the first time, you'll want to see this to understand how the Voodoo lines help us find these trades, right? Because when the price did turn up from this low on March 25th, right, it was right from this Voodoo skyline. You can see it magnified here, right? Dead right on the skyline. It bounced, and then it tested and held this skyline above, and that started to confirm the reversal. And then it went further to test and hold this white line, this snow line, right, the next level up, and that provided even more evidence for the bullish case, because snow lines are even more important levels than skylines, and therefore holding them is an even more important bullish signal. And while after it continued up, it did pause at least briefly and reflect down a little bit, right, from this level. The next skyline up, remember what we said, these snow lines are more important. And the bounce from the snow line was, as expected, able to overwhelm the resistance, that skyline, push it, to and through the next skyline up, and then to that fire line level, the one we said is the most important, right? So given how important it is, and that these are really great levels of support and resistance, no surprise that it paused here for a little bit. But by pausing, by not just completely reflecting down, right, which it very easily could have done. That's a common behavior at a fire line. But by not doing that, and by consolidating so tightly over several days, it actually gave us confidence that this was going to continue up, and continue up it did, right? Where to? Well, right to a Voodoo skyline, right? Are you seeing a pattern? I mean, do you see how this moves? Or what I mean when I say we move systematically from level to level to level, right? goes up to resistance, you get out, it pulls back to support. In this case, the most minor of the levels, the Voodoo Mogul, but that was still a great place to get in for another leg to the upside, right? Choppy hold of support here at the skyline and right up into that prior all-time high, just shy of the skyline, but I had trades for it to get to near that level on that day, and they panned out. Right. So it's this order to the price action which makes the Voodoo line so central to the way that both Henry and I trade. And while we can never know exactly how price is going to act at one of these levels, just being able to know that certain levels have some significance, and by using that knowledge to focus our trades on price moving between them, right, that gives us an edge, and we can maximize the value of that edge by combining the right option strategies with the right levels at the right time. And nothing highlights that concept of the right levels at the right time as the way this first part of that campaign ended, right? By locking up profits up here at the skyline, being in cash to have dry powder to reload where? Right at the Voodoo fire line where we came down to and turned back up, right? So so the systematic price action we keep talking about, that showed us, right, where to get out, where to get in, and then right, free to get in back here at the fire line. Sure, we came modestly below it, right? But pretty much found support here. And most importantly, gave me one of my favorite signals, right? You come below, you can't stay below, you pop back above, test and hold. That's like the money setup, right? I love it every time I see it, including this one. That was the cue to get in, get out at the skyline, right? Yeah, I got back in, wrote it up to a mogul, and what did it do, right? I mean, are you seeing this? Right? It comes back to the skyline for support and then heads right back up. Now we saw this last week. This is where the chart ended last week. So while we didn't walk through all the trades, just the swings that led to them, right? Can you see how if you start to get the hang of this, that you could that you could plan some trades around it? Right. That's all we were doing, and I'll bring it current with the latest trades, right? But the first thing that, before we get to that, the latest set on the more recent chart, because as we talked about earlier, this has been a choppy, insane market for the past week or so, right? So it's been in a narrower range. So I'm going to do a little narrower range chart that's going to hide this 4083 fire line level. So what I want to talk about just before we go to that next chart is that, look, a couple of days after we were talking last week, I put on a bearish trade. Right? Now, we were still above support, but there were some things that I was seeing that were warning, hey, we could, even though I was overall bullish, we could come back down and visit this area. So I was putting on a trade just in case we did, right? Not as the only trade as we go forward and look at this stuff. But, I was also putting on shorter term bullish trades. Why? Well, what do we have here on the 26th of last month, right? Skyline, support, right? We don't want to be bullish if we're holding support. And sometime, and I was targeting up to here. Right? That's the natural target. You've already seen why, right? We keep moving to and from them. But sometimes what doesn't happen is as important as what does. That's with just about everything in the markets, right? And in this case, what didn't happen when we gapped up to start the month, right, is we didn't hold it, right? We came right back below. And where was that gap up? Right at a Voodoo Mogul, this least important level. Coming back in, right, told me, especially since I think I had only another day, maybe 2 days on those options. Yeah, just get out, right? Take your profit. It wasn't much, but it was profit. And if I didn't, well, it wouldn't have remained a profit, right? What doesn't happen is as important as what does. But those bearish positions, those were longer dated. And gosh, I was starting, right, to get pretty excited. We were working our way below some of these levels. And even, right, on this day, we another gap down, right, below the skyline. I know I recognize a few faces and names from our chat rooms. And some of you were probably in this trade with me, the bullish one, which is okay, and this bearish one, which I'll apologize for because it didn't work out, right? It looked good here, but we said, if it comes back above, again, get out. This was the level, right? We're shouting it loudly. And we got out, but it was also a place to get long. So I did that, right? Why? Oh, if we're not going down, we're still heading up. Long-term trend was bullish. Buy some calls, get out at the mogul, right? That was a good move, right? And then this day, right? This was another one of those gap ups, right? That just totally fell apart after the open. But where did it fall to? Voodoo mogul. And that was another place to get in, right? This was what, day before yesterday. So Tuesday, get out yesterday. Right? And then today, gosh, another gap up. And this is what I'm talking about. New all-time high. Where? Right at a voodoo line. Right? And again, I shorted this. Right? You guys in the trading room, you saw me, right? Sold it at 47 even in the ES June contract. So just about everything you saw me do, and a lot of what we're going to be talking about in the class is going to be options trading in terms of the trade setups that really maximize the flexibility of the movement between these levels. But you can do it with futures too once you understand the roadmaps we'll be talking about in the class. And so two of these trades, this one long, this one short, which I'm out of, right? Just a quick 21 points down in the S&P 500 in just a few minutes. Those two were futures. Everything else was options. And when you bring these in to those, right, just the whole campaign, we're at 12,870 per contract coming into this, right, from just about a week ago. Add another 3,000 and change per contract to that, and that's the sort of thing that you can do once you understand the systematic way that price moves between the lines, how to read that price movement, and how to trade the strategies we've come up with to take advantage of those moves. All right, so let's go ahead and skip this. We're running long, and Henry's got some good stuff for you as well. Look, the Voodoo lines aren't just for the S&P 500. You've already seen them on Bitcoin. You've already seen them on Ethereum, both of those on TradingView. This is another chart on TradingView. This one is of Weyerhaeuser. TradingView, I've already seen it tonight. I already know it because of all the requests I've gotten. I know a lot of you love the platform and you've been itching to use the indicator on it. Or others may just live in places where your platforms that are available to you don't have Voodoo lines available, right? But just about everybody can use TradingView. And now nobody needs to watch a chart of Weyerhaeuser without the Voodoo lines available. Now, some of you might be saying, well, yeah, okay, so what? Why would I ever want to watch a chart of Weyerhaeuser? And I get it, right? This isn't a name I usually trade myself, right? And I'm sorry if I've offended the one guy who trades Weyerhaeuser all day long as his only thing. But for me, look, the first time I ever remember trading it was last year. But again, don't you think that if you knew, right, that this level was hanging out here at last year's lows in March, that you could have made some money off of that, right? Combined with the knowledge of the way things systematically move. And don't you think that that if it if you knew this level in advance, the fire line, most important level, that when it came down and tested and held, when we saw what that meant for things like the S&P 500, that you could have used it, and it systematically, right, finds these levels and resistance at the highs at the fire line. Do you think you could use that? I mean, if not, look, we'll teach you our strategies. That's one of the things we want to go through. But I'm thinking that some of you already see how to use this without that knowledge, right? Because these are great levels to trade, and they pinpoint potential areas of support and resistance before price gets there. And it allows us to create option strategies which profit from the moves to, from, and between those levels. And I think you only need a little bit of time. I think you can probably, I hope, already see, and just in a little tonight, right, that how obvious it is that that price moves between these levels in just an uncanny way. Now, what takes a little bit more time is to learn to interpret the price action, right? I see Stack asking, how do we know which levels it's going to move to, which levels it's going to reverse go through, those sorts of things. Yep. Look, we can never know for sure. That's one of the things that I mentioned, but there are clues in how it moves. That's a big part of what we're going to be talking about in the class on Saturday. And the other thing that's going to be a big part of that is talking through, right? Talking through how we construct option strategies, knowing that we can't be sure, right? So those are big pieces of it, right? And once you get through that, and once you absorb those things, then you can put these ideas to use in a wide range of symbols, which move systematically between the Voodoo lines levels. And that systematic movement is one of the reasons why Henry and I focus on trading stocks that have the Voodoo lines available. There are over 285 of them, right? Plus a variety of indices, futures, Forex, and now crypto. And that makes it easy for us to adapt to conditions as they change, right? So when, late last year, it becomes apparent that lumber is suddenly a thing, then you can come and look at things like Weyerhaeuser. That's what drew me to it. That's why I was buying it off the fire line and looking at it to begin with, to even notice that it was coming into the fire line. Right. So, we can just go to whatever we want to trade, see how it's acting with the Voodoo lines, whether it's Weyerhaeuser or, seeing that micro Bitcoin futures are available and playing with them, whatever it happens to be. Now, 2021 is not 2020. Weyerhaeuser may not be the stock to watch anymore. Hey, it's coming down from its fire line now. And the things moving today may not be the things moving now. And I know Henry wants to tell you about some of our favorite names for 2021. He also has some additional examples to show you of trades in stocks, right? Which demonstrate not only the power of the indicator, but also the trading techniques we use to take advantage, right, of the way price moves from Voodoo line to Voodoo line. So I will be back to join you in Q&A later, but for right now, let me go ahead and turn it back over to Mr. Henry Gamble.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And I like how you mentioned, just in the slides that you've shown this evening, you can already begin to see the plan unfold, or how the systematic movement between these lines can really aid traders in their quest to be profitable. And as we look at some of the symbols that I found that the Voodoo lines really work best on, I'm going to start off with Tesla. It's one of my favorite stocks for several reasons. It has great liquidity. It tends to move well. And there again, it actually has the Voodoo lines. Remember, the Voodoo lines are manually created, and that's part of, David does run these every month, provides updates as they are needed. But let's start by looking at one of my favorite end-of-day setups, and where squeezes have shown confluences with the Voodoo analysis. Voodoo lines are a natural fit for options trades, as we're trading a market where it's helpful to know strike prices ahead of time. The Voodoo lines are generally exhibiting one of three personalities, whether we're looking for price to hold a level of support or resistance, travel to a specific level, or simply stick at a level and consolidate. This study set helps us identify the particular levels to use. The Tesla trades we're about to look at benefited from knowing these levels in advance. They also benefited from the way price moves from line to line, so we can anticipate which of the Voodoo lines to target and which level to use. So in some of these real trade examples, this is where we begin setting up some spreads to take advantage of Tesla holding a particular level of resistance. I knew we had a snow line with close proximity to the 625 strike, so this is where I began setting up short call spreads. You can see here about the final 90 minutes of the day is when I begin pursuing these ideas, and we start scaling into these, taking them, about 90 minutes, then an hour, and, really basically just establishing your position there at the end of the day. The end of day 15-minute squeeze shown on the right-hand side of your chart is my trigger chart. And after having failed at this snow line of resistance, we start to establish the opinion that there may be more downside to be had. Now, to show you this setup, and for those of you that are students of the squeeze, you'll feel right at home, because the backbone of this, or part of what I lean on for a directional opinion, is the daily squeeze that is fired short. So that's one of the things that kind of anchors me. Then do you see how we get the gap below the snow line? You come right to it right here. You have the big gap below. This helps me begin to establish this as being a particular area of resistance. And then into the end of the day, my signal begins to form, letting me know that there's, time to take a directional opportunity. So we establish these, and the very next day, the setup plays right into our hand, dropping from the snow line and quickly seeing the premium of the 625 calls that we are short begin to dissolve. This is a great way to trade this analysis, but some traders prefer the risk reward of a butterfly over that of the call credit spread. With that in mind, I begin setting up a few plays with less risk. In this case, a $30 wide butterfly. You can see I've placed the short put strike at 590, and look where Tesla heads almost directly when the market opens the next morning. Here you can see the break of our 45-degree line, right? Kind of coming right through here. This is the signal that I'm referring you to at the end of the day. This is the resistance that I set up the short call spreads against. And then as the underlying breaks that 45, where we are headed basically straight to is this tree line. So you see midday how it comes just almost but doesn't quite get it. Then you get a very modest bounce, and it's just magnetically drawn to this and does satisfy the tree line target by the end of the session. So, this was taken 9 minutes before the cash session closed. So Tesla's ending the day at 589. Our Voodoo level was 590. There again, that level of precision will help you structure these types of butterfly spreads where you know exactly where you're wanting to place your short strikes, exactly where you are purchasing the longs on the other end. And these butterflies made a quick 50% overnight, and they're a great way to complement the theta positive, short call spreads. One of my favorite setups and a key part of my 2021 trading plan utilizes the Voodoo lines in conjunction with the squeeze. I've studied the squeeze for more than a decade, and I've learned that not all squeezes are created equal. Some will exceed expectations, some will consolidate longer than expected, and some will fire counter trend. Knowing which of these scenarios is most likely to unfold can add a considerable edge to your trading. These scenarios are best mapped out using the Voodoo lines. Let's look at this in a recent example in Caterpillar. So this is a daily chart of Caterpillar with just the Squeeze Pro. This is one way that I would look at a chart prior to having added the Voodoo lines to my analysis. We've got a long duration squeeze that's oscillated through several phases of compression, a generally bullish trend, but no real levels to act off of. With the Voodoo lines now added to my chart, I have a list of several inflection points that the stock may face. And most importantly, I have a primary objective to associate with the daily squeeze. I have found that the primary Voodoo lines, the fire lines, tree lines, and snow lines, have a magnetic quality to them, especially when combined with the daily squeeze. One of my favorite setups is buying Delta 70 calls when the squeeze is firing and targeting these key technical levels. In this period, I spread my risk between some Delta 70s and Delta 50s. They both yielded some great returns over that 3-day trading period. I like mentioning, and it's in my opinion, that you are not going to find a more precise technical indicator than what we're discussing here tonight. And for me to say something like that, step back and consider how accurate these truly were. This was a 4-day trade where we took almost zero heat and sold directly at the high. Consider the fact that Caterpillar is in a full-on breakout, right? It's trading at lifetime highs. To be able to call the high for the day and ultimately the high that is still in place within 44 cents is more than just luck. It's a precise technical approach to finding pivotal points in a stock's price. Knowing these levels and being prepared to sell into strength is one of the most helpful things that you can learn when pursuing directional options trading. Here again, these are some of the entries that I showed you at the beginning, or exits rather, both of them that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. So exiting the options here, the high of the session was 1865. You can see my fill prices on that 10 lot at 1850. Then when you move to the other one, this is the one that I just love the way this played out. But high of that daily bar is $27. I exit the 10 lot position at $27. You'll notice that this screenshot was taken exactly a month ago, right? So that's when that was taken. We're going to look at where we are today in it. But first, the 10 contracts of the 220s and 230s, when added together, ended up being good for $1,400 over the course of 3 days. Not only is finding precision exits one of the most gratifying parts of trading options, but it goes hand in hand with not giving profits back and not having to take too much heat. Think about that when we look at how Caterpillar closed that same day. This kind of close does not bode well for the next session. I'd say that this pattern with a 15-minute squeeze at the end of the day fills the gap from the previous session about 90% of the time. This knowledge adds an extremely powerful edge to directional trading. I love putting myself in the moment of this, like, let's pretend like I didn't have these Voodoo tree lines there, and you get a move like this. Do you really think you're going to be sitting there prepared to sell at the highest price this underlying stock has ever traded for? I don't know about you, but it's easy to fall into that feeling of euphoria if you don't have a clearly defined plan. Now, what I'm showing you is, okay, you have all the euphoria in the morning. Maybe you decide to keep pushing it. When you get a close like this is not looking good, right? That's a squeeze that's looking to fire to the downside. And just like clockwork, Caterpillar gaps lower the next day, filling the gap and triggering that 15-minute bearish squeeze. Having sold at the highs the day prior, we can be more objective about where we would like to re-enter, and we're not having to take all the heat from where we were doing so great, and then down here $7, $8 lower is usually not a fun place to be. This is a price chart from today's action in those Caterpillar calls. I left a digit off there, the $220 calls. But notice how I showed you in the beginning of this where we exited at $27, and I'm showing you the screenshot from the day that happened. Notice that not only did we sell into the high of the move, but we sold it at the highest price that this contract will ever trade for, right? You can see how it closed today. You can see the incredible inflection point that tree line provided. Well, we didn't take any of this heat in the pullback, and we sold it at the dead high. So that was just one of the, I love showing that because it really does get you to feel the power that this analysis can bring to your work. Now, a few more examples here. The markets have been especially volatile here lately, and you've got a lot of traders that want to look for opportunity where they're not leaving their money at risk overnight, right? They're focused mostly on day trading. You will be hard pressed to find a more helpful study when seeking these kinds of opportunities. Let's look at this with a couple trades in Amazon. There are two primary things that caught my eye when setting up this Amazon trade. The first was the gap below the snow line. And if you've been following along with these examples, or if you review this in the recording, you'll see how this Amazon relationship was very similar to what I just showed you in Tesla, right? We get the gap below the snow line, the failure to recover above it, and then the subsequent lower high made the next day. This helps me form the opinion that I may have found a formidable area of resistance, right? Right there at that snow line. Is like, as you're saying, do we know which ones are going to hold? Not definitively, but you use patterns like this and their reflective nature off of them to begin forming an opinion. Then we move on a bit further and we find the 39-minute squeeze that begins to form. If I know that 33.65 is resistance, and I have a squeeze that's about to fire short, well, then I can begin setting up bearish trades to participate in the selling. When you set up an options trade, you're usually going to be doing one of two things. You're going to be paying a debit to get in, or you're going to be taking in a credit. Both are perfectly valid methods of participating in the move, and I find the choice often comes down to an individual trader's personality. How much risk do you want to take? What probability of success are you looking for? Your strategy will have a lot to do with that. I usually find myself somewhere in between, and I wanted to demonstrate an approach to both sides of this technical setup. One common debit transaction is the put-debit spread. So here I purchased a $200 wide put spread in Amazon for $80 to initiate the bearish position. The markets continued selling off after taking that entry off of our squeeze, and about 90 minutes later, I took my day trading exit signal off of a 15-minute chart. The spread was then trading for $92.50, or a 16% return on the debit paid. Here's our entry, right? Continues to fall off of the squeeze, and this is where I exit. All of this is time-stamped. All of this is found in those entries and exits, and you can see how the timestamp coincides with, there's my drop, there's the move right into the skyline. I give it a minute or two, right, to see if it's going to hold, because I wanted to get a little more of this, but once it begins to bounce, I'm keeping a very short leash on this particular idea to focus on the day trading aspect of it. And then I also took the credit approach. So the credit side can be done a couple different ways, but in this case, and because I was so focused on a day trade, I chose to use a short in the money call, right? If you're day trading these, you can keep a very direct eye on them. There's no chance of the product gapping against you. And that's one of the times that I'll put on these, theta positive, but more aggressive kind of strategies. And this is just the exact same thing. With this one, I was a little more lenient still, getting out about 10 or 15 minutes after that skyline had proven itself. But I was still able to pocket a good percentage of that credit and return about $2,200 on two trades, both of them being single lot transactions in about 90 minutes. Continuing the Amazon saga forward and just showing you how more of my favorite stocks tend to respect these levels so well, the next morning, Tuesday the 11th, is a sharply bearish open for stocks. Several names gap down 2% or greater, and these bearish opens can be one of the most tempting moments to chase the purchase of premium rich puts. We've all been in that situation of feeling that big drop and, oh gosh, I've got to short something. But since we knew that Amazon's proximity to the fire line was telling us that we were closer to support, we began looking at selling those puts, taking advantage of the sharp jump in implied volatility and taking the other side of the traders that are reacting to their emotions and chasing entries. So this is where we gap down. In this moment, I have no positions in Amazon, so we were totally flat. As you begin to recover, notice it didn't hit the fire line with the precision that you will sometimes find, but we knew that we were very close to it, and just the general panic of the morning, right? In this moment, you also saw the put-call ratio become very elevated. So this is where we initiate the sale of those front week put options, and then we cover them right on the move back into the skyline. That was my opening day trade, and just where if I can capture that in the opening 90 minutes or so, that's usually what I'm trying to wrap up for my cash open. Well, as the day progressed, then look how the skyline continued to be an inflection point. We rip up above it, and that's where I cover those short puts. Then here, here, and here. Do you see how this level continues to offer support in Amazon? That allowed us to set up multiple trades into the afternoon. So again, dissect these as you see fit. I want to give you the overview. I want to show you the timestamped entries and exits. These are color-coded to show you that this was kind of that morning campaign. And then here's where I initiated further positions into the end of the day. Most all of them are revolving around the sale of premium against these Voodoo lines. So it's extremely helpful for day trading, but the versatility does not stop there. It's like the best Swiss Army knife I've ever found. And Voodoo lines are incredibly helpful in choppy markets. They will also help you with earnings trades. So let's look at an example of this in Peloton. I'm going to show it to you first without this Voodoo roadmap. This is a 5-minute chart of Peloton with the extended session hours included. And I'd say for the most part, this strikes me as noise. You know, there are no clear inflection points to act off of. But as soon as we add the Voodoo lines, our path becomes much more clear. You know, Peloton was a unique trade to set up primarily because so much bad news had already hit the stock prior to the earnings numbers having been released. The Voodoo lines are helpful in these situations as they help provide ranges and suggest strike prices that could possibly be sold if the worst is already over. So I played Peloton with 4 different spreads. 3 of them were directly influenced by the Voodoo lines. For the Peloton earnings trades in toss, I had 3 put credit spreads that returned just almost $4 each, and then 2 ratio spreads that didn't return anything, but were basically free to put on and had an extremely high probability of making at least $1. If you enjoy ratio spreads, I usually refer to those as high probability lotto tickets, and they are one of my favorite strategies to employ in high volatility situations, especially with the aid of the Voodoo lines. The more aggressive approach I took in Tasty, but I used the same levels to configure these spreads. Now, as you go in here, you'll be able to see the premium sales, the ratio spreads that I did against that psychological value of 100. But what I really want you to take away from this particular screenshot is the precision of the tree line. So yeah, all the little short premium trades all did just fine and basically had to take no heat on Peloton. But this was another good spot to make some real good cash, where in the extended session, after I was able to confirm, okay, the worst is basically over, right? Peloton's not getting hammered. It's finding some stability. I picked up some shares in that moment. And then look at where I was able to sell them, 89.47. Now, this is where I sold the first batch because I wanted to just get out directly at that level. As the day opened up a little bit more, it basically confirmed that the area of resistance was holding. So I had to get out of the remainder of them at worse prices. But what I want to show you is that I picked those up at 85 and then look at the sale just perfectly at this tree line. So not only do they work in, stocks, etc., but they'll work in extended session trade when things can be just, kind of off the wall and totally random. Now, admittedly, that first flush got a little bit below, sure, but look at it in the extended session. That is exactly what I was working to do. Buy it somewhere down here and then take advantage of this area to sell it against for profits. So that's the real kicker in that Peloton trade. It ended up being great for both the campaigns in Toss and Tasty. And it's just one more way that you can use these for your options trading. Now, the majority of what I do is focused in the options market, but every now and then there will be situations where futures are a better tool for the job. I like futures for their additional leverage. a good product to compare would be the ETF of GLD against gold futures, right? Incredibly different products. Futures also have the advantage of being more available, right? Open nearly around the clock. So on the morning of May 17th, gold was breaking out, and the Voodoo lines provided an especially helpful roadmap on the path to higher prices. With this breakout underway, and this is shown by this clearing of the trend line, where if you step back and look at it, that's actually a very significant break off of what was that major descending trend line in gold. But I know that as we're breaking out from that level, on the path to 1865, we may encounter a pause at 1869 and a tick, and then 1875 half. Again, you see those Voodoo lines laid on the chart before I ever got started trading it, and that helps me know what I'm gunning for. The opening strength carries us directly into that first area of resistance where I decide to book profits as the gold pit markets close. So I really do strive to use technical targets and then tie them in with moments in time that may be the most beneficial. So you can see that move right into your Voodoo line as you close out that session. And that was just a perfect spot. Buy the breakout, head into your Voodoo line, and it couldn't have worked better. So this is where I began scaling into the futures position and then just flipped them all right there at that Voodoo line. So this is some of the work that David and I have been perfecting over the past several years. I know I can speak for the both of us when I say that we are very excited to finally be able to bring you these setups, the logic behind them, and how you can learn it for yourself in our Voodoo Masters strategy course. In this course, David and I are going to be showing you how we read the systematic movements between these lines, how we set up trades, and how to choose the right strikes for your option spreads. The course is going to be comprised of 3 primary pieces. We'll have the class, we'll have 3 days of live trading, which there's no better way to learn this than to see it in a live environment, and then it will also include the Voodoo Lines indicator. So a more complete breakdown of everything inside the Voodoo Masters strategy course. Again, we have the class that's going to be going on this Saturday with David and myself. We have the Voodoo Lines indicator that applies to stocks, futures, Forex, crypto, right? As David mentioned for you, you'll get a recording of each of those strategy classes, the 3 days of live trading, and then 30 days worth of the Voodoo Line stock updates. There again, the class will be this Saturday, June 12th from 12 to 4 Central Time. The live trading dates are going to be the 15th, 18th, and 22nd. For each of those sessions, we'll be getting the cash session started with you and take it to about the middle of the day. So, usually trying to be most active in about the first 90 minutes of the session, and then using the remainder of our time together for dedicated teaching, questions, making sure that you have all of your questions answered in relationship to this analysis. David and I swear by the Voodoo lines because of their uncanny accuracy. If you want more precise entries and exits, there's no better time to add this indicator to your toolbox. If you already have the Voodoo lines, just give sales a call and they will take care of you. So our customer service team can be reached at 512-266-8659. They are standing by. You can also email if that's more your speed, or if you feel confident in your browser capabilities, simplertrading.com/levels, and I'm sure that link will be shared. You can just click on that and then sign up online. And they are available on TradingView. Also want to mention that if you continue to choose to continue to update your stock update subscription after the 30 days, it is $47 a month, but this is part of the manual process that David goes through to create these for each of these levels. Also, if something kind of comes into favor, like he was mentioned there with the Weyerhaeuser chart, levels weren't on that to begin with, but hey, he sees something that he wants to trade. We apply the levels, and then you have that roadmap. We will continue to do that for, whatever it is that may be the next hot thing. So that's part of what the updates get you. Also wanted to make sure that you can pay for this with PayPal credit. That is now a way that we're accepting this. So if you'd like to get signed up for that, the Voodoo Masters course, again, going to be this Saturday from 12 to 4. It comes with the 3 days of live trading and will also come with the indicator. So, I like to say, kind of like David did, just even in the broadcast we've done here tonight, if you go back and study it, and if you really try to pay attention to the examples that have been shown, you will see a methodology of how price moves in between these lines and how we begin to structure spreads off of them. It's one of the greatest tools I have ever utilized, probably because of my love for spread trading. That's part of it, right? It helps me get prepared with the strikes I want to use well ahead of time, but then can also be applied to all of these other various markets. I really do encourage you to give it a shot. There's no obligation, obviously. If you don't continue your stock subscription, you will still have the Voodoo line indicator. You just won't get the updates, right? So if something goes on to make new lifetime highs or changes in a drastic way, you'll still have the old levels, but I would not be putting my name on them if I didn't have complete faith in them, and if they haven't revolutionized my trading. I really hope that you'll give yourself a chance to try it and see what David and I can teach you around it. You have anything else you wanted to add to that, David, or were there any questions that I may be able to address here kind of towards the end of our slides?
Yeah, I see a bunch of questions starting to come in, Henry. So we can just start taking them if you want. So actually, I see one right now. Saying busy right now, but maybe looking at doing this later in the summer. And I totally get it. The one thing that I would tell you to think about is that while these classes are often sometimes offered as a recording later, we really wanted to make sure that this wasn't the sort of thing where the live trading was offered as an upgrade or this or that, that you really have it available to you. Because one of the things that you get from that live trading, right, certainly just 3 more days of experience of actually seeing how price moves from line to line to line in a live market environment. And now I see someone else, saying that they're still busy at work, when the live trading is offered. Even if you're watching the live trading in the evening on the same day it happened, right? There is just a tremendous value in the learning that comes, right, from seeing the patterns unfold with the Voodoo lines at the time when it's still unknown what's going to happen next, right? When you're still at that fuzzy right edge of the chart. All right, right now, I mean, we've shown you all these examples, right, where we say we did this here and then it turned, and it did, right? But it's a totally different experience, right? Watching it after it's happened, right? And saying, well, yeah, you can see now that it was going to do that, right? And seeing it as it is unfolding when it's still uncertain, and it's still most of the time going to be uncertain that evening, and that's just going to build your confidence in understanding the indicator, knowing how it works.
And you say, does this work with the meme stocks? Well, remember, that was one of the first examples that I showed you, is where we were playing GameStop, whatever week that was in May, but it was just near perfect. Now, there was a couple of days that I had to hold through a little bit of a pullback. I didn't get the perfect entry like I was trying for, but the options did go on to triple. And it is the core part of that is taking a squeeze into a fire line. And while not to simplify it, that is the crux of it. And once you begin to see that pattern, it's not that difficult to trade. Young says, my respect for you, David, has gone up after testing the Voodoo lines and knowing that you developed it. You are a smart guy. I will second that comment, Young. You can imagine being a student of John's for the past 13, 14 years. You have a lot of people that come to you, right? Everybody's got something they want to show you on revolutionary analysis. David is one of the few that I've stuck with. And the more that I work with him, the more I learn what's really going on here. It's the best thing I've ever found. So thank you for that. And I do agree with you.
But look, I will say to you, Henry, and to Young, look, you guys give me too much credit, right? Look, it was some work to get. This is an incredibly complicated indicator. Squeezing it into toss, yeah, really hard. And there was a lot of work that went into figuring out the math to make it work, but also how to do that manual analysis that Henry told you about in a systematic, repeatable way. But at the end of the day, there's something more to this, right? Like I told you before, it's as much math as psychology. So while I kind of fiddled around with the mathematical relationship and figured out a repeatable way to do the analysis, I got to tell you, I can tell you what it does. I can tell you from over a decade of watching it how well it works. But it's not like I know why it works, right? It's not like I have a deep understanding of why markets keep moving from Voodoo line to Voodoo line, and I watch it in amazement just as much as you guys did. So look, maybe I would be crowing a bit more if if I felt that there was something I was doing that was making the market go from line to line to line. And I just played around with some math that works, right?
Well, you're very humble, David, and I kind of get what you're saying when you say that, which makes it that much more fascinating, right? You just run the levels and put the math behind it, but it continues to fulfill this type of pattern. And yeah, I'm a direct beneficiary of being able to learn it. So.
Yeah, and Young's asking maybe market makers follow Voodoo lines too. I don't know that any active market makers follow Voodoo lines. I have several clients, right, who are retired market makers who trade retail from home, just like you and me, who use the Voodoo lines religiously. Some old pit traders who use it religiously in the futures. Yeah, but I don't think most market making is done by computers, and I don't think they're using the Voodoo lines. John's asking what they're based on, and Henry, maybe I'll just grab the screens for a second and just do a quick version of this. All right. So they are loosely based on Elliott wave. Now, what I mean by loosely is that Elliott wave has a lot of problems with it that are well documented. Now, I use it myself, and I'm an Elliott wave practitioner. But one of the problems that everybody cites, and they cite it because, well, it is a legitimate problem, is that when you're sitting over here studying the wave patterns on the right part of the chart, everyone's disagreeing about what wave is going on. And while it can be useful as a technique to predict how far the market might go and when it might reverse, if you know what patterns unfolding, if you don't, then it's really hard to do that, right? So everyone says, yeah, it works in hindsight. After the fact, you can put all these labels on the chart and know that they're right, but it only works in hindsight. And as I mentioned to you, I'm an inventor. I'm a creative guy, and so I tinker with things. And a lot of what I do is I just take things, right? And if I'm trying to do something different, I turn them on their head. And I do that with this problem, right? It only works in hindsight. And I say, well, okay, let me pick up that word works, right? Okay, it only works in hindsight, but I'm going to grab that word, it works, and grab it like a dog with a bone and say, gosh, how many times do we spend or how much time do we spend fussing with problems that or trading techniques that don't work, right? And here someone says it only works in hindsight, and I hear works, right? That's the thing you grab onto. So what Voodoo lines do, right? What I do is I go back here, the left side of the chart, not the fuzzy right side, right? The left side, where people are saying, yeah, okay, we know the patterns in here. Everyone agrees, but they happened in the past, right? And do some math on them and project levels that are relevant to today. That's the guts of what Voodoo lines do. And that's why it's not available on everything, right? Because I've got to study the left side of the chart. So if it's something that IPO'd 3 days ago, there's no left side of the chart to agree on, right? If it's something that's just too messy to find the patterns, I'm not going to have it. If it's something like VIX, right, where it's not an asset, right, it's a measurement, well, it's not going to have a pattern. Right. But everything else, I do my best to include things that folks are trading. Right. And that I like to trade. So that's the rough idea. And I'll give the screens back to you, Henry.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And I always love that example because you do such a good job of explaining Elliott wave to people that may not be as versed in it. I studied a lot of Fibonacci, etc., but the Elliott wave was always a little more mystical to me, but you do such a good job of bringing it down to earth and documenting it in a way that's actually tradable. So again, that link is just simplertrading.com/levels. I see that Daryl has posted that for you up in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. That should be completely clickable. So if you do just click on it, it'll take you right to the place that you'd like to sign up. Otherwise, you can use the phone number there at the bottom of your screen. And we'll be happy to answer any other questions that come up.
Yeah, BMax is asking, hey, if I've got to analyze these things, right, what happens if I get hit by a beer truck, right? Absolutely valid question, right? Which is why I have made sure not only, right, to train folks in how to do this, in how to do the update, built tools to use in how to do the update, records of everything that I've updated, so that whoever carries on can see the history of updates to all the symbols, hours and hours and hours of videos showing me doing it. So yeah, we've made sure that there's lots of support for the legacy of this thing. Yeah, absolutely. So, Ishan, the updates are as needed, right? They are generally about once a month, and usually there are, right? So every once in a while, these long-term patterns that we were talking about eventually exhaust, and so when that happens, we got to put out new levels for symbols, and so and that's why there's a subscription to it, right? Because I'm spending time literally every day, because I can't review 300 symbols in one day, so every day I do a few and I keep watching them, and we try and limit it to about once a month or so. Sometimes when a really actively traded stock needs an update, I'm not going to wait a month if Amazon needs an update, right? That'll come out right away. If Weyerhaeuser needs an update, it might wait and be batched up with a monthly one, but roughly once a month. Yeah, Clarity, the subscription is only to keep the stocks active. And that's just how Voodoo Lines evolved. So when I first built it, it was on, indices and futures and Forex. And I was trading a lot back then. And I wasn't sure it would work as well on stocks. Actually, this is some really good history for those of you who are really interested, right? I do Elliott wave work on the S&P and on commodities and this and that. That's where I use my Elliott wave. And for me, I have found that it is dismal, right? Dismal at working with individual stocks, right? Doing Elliott wave work on Apple for me is worthless, right? And so I had a ton of people who kept coming to me saying, do the Voodoo Lines on stocks. Please give us the Voodoo Lines on stocks, right? And being based on Elliott Wave, I said, I don't think it's going to work, and they're going to change more often, and it's a huge amount of work for me, and this and that, right? So, but people kept asking and asking and asking. I said, okay, let me give it a try. And what I found is, again, we solved a problem. That's where other people dragged me to solving the problem. That, trying to get these short-term right side of the chart patterns in Apple is impossible. But if I look back far enough, they're obvious to me, and you project the levels. Well, I can use the levels in Apple even if I'm never going to try and count waves, right? Do Elliott wave analysis on the chart, and so it was added as an add-on. It does require a lot more work to keep it up to date. The stocks change more often. They can be more volatile, and they require much closer monitoring. But perhaps as much a legacy thing as anything else. Stocks, futures, Forex, or not stocks, stock indices, right? Futures, Forex, now crypto. Updates for those are included for life. The individual stocks, that's by subscription. Yeah, David H., it's just the math, right? That controls. There are tree lines between fire lines and snow lines between everything else, and we talk about that in the class, right? They mark progress. Smaller lines mark progress to bigger degree lines, and it's part of how we evaluate, the trend, the strength of the trend, spots for support and resistance to track trades. So really involved answer when we dig into it, which is why we want to take a few hours to go through it, but that's the short answer. So Jimmy Florida is saying, how far in the future? How far what in the future? How far do we project prices? If it's a different question, let me know. The projection of prices is really in price. So we have prices well beyond the range that things are currently trading at, and so they've been at that level often for years when price gets there. Right? I mean, that Ethereum chart that we saw, it hasn't been there for decades because, Ethereum hasn't been around that long, but those levels have been there for over a year, right? When Ethereum finally got to that all-time high right at a fire line. And, the Amazon high that, the all-time high that existed for, that was in place until like last year. That was right at a fire line, and it ran into it several times. And it had been there for years and years and years, just waiting for Amazon to get there. Right, so that's and that's part of the advantage of this thing. The levels are there, and you can know about them and plan for what you're going to do when and if price gets there, right? And that's a big part of the strategies we're teaching.
You get that question fair enough or often enough to say like, oh, well, how long have they been up there? Because it sometimes does seem just almost too good to be true. But notice in those screenshots where I showed you in Caterpillar, the documentation of these levels, well, I was eyeing this for a target when we were back here in April. So I have the levels in mind. I know what I'm looking for as a target. And it's been there the whole time. Now that here we are, fast forward a month to where we are today, and you can see how important this is. How many days did you perfectly test this as resistance? Failure, that's where we sold it, right? Because you're catching the squeeze into the Voodoo line. Then you have failure, failure. There's 4, 5 perfect tests of that level. Do you see how helpful it is to be aware of that so you're not stuck in this? I mean, to me, it's completely priceless.
Yeah, I mean, Henry, you were showing that that chart earlier, that Caterpillar chart of the options prices and how they came off. But man, look, I mean, that Cat gave up a hairball today, and we were in it all the way up to that tree line, and then we took our profit and we said, yeah, done, right? I mean, you were doing it with calls, I was doing it with butterflies. I mean, literally, butterflies right at that 245 strike. And why did I have butterflies at that 245 strike? Well, now you know. And look, I don't want to call out anyone in our chat rooms, right? But Henry and I were both in them that day, and we were sitting there, and folks, Caterpillar was breaking out to new all-time highs, and there were folks saying, yeah, we're buying more, we're buying more, we're buying more. And Henry, was sitting there saying, guys, you can do what you want. I'm not telling you it's not going higher, but I'm booking profits on all of mine, and here's why.
We will be placing trades together for the live sessions. We will be, and I think that's also worth pointing out, that if you sign up for the course, it comes with the live trading. And if you are unable to join, you will still get push alerts, right? Do away with text messages. Nobody wants text messages anymore, right? We need to have an understanding here that push notifications are better. So you install the Simpler Trading app to your mobile, and then even if you're out and about, at your day job, whatever, you will still get these alerts pushed to you, and you can trade them if you can't. If you have the ability, you can get in there and trade them. Even if not that, you will still be able to review the work each evening. And it is worth stepping back and learning. So whatever your schedule is, wherever you find yourself, there's some way to take advantage of this material. Well, and Eric, if that's the way you feel, again, none of us can argue to make you feel like you need to take this, right? I'm not going to force you to do anything, but I would at least encourage you, if you don't decide to go with it right now, spend a few more days with us in the chat room. Spend a few more days looking at these over time. And I will tell you again, I have studied under John for more than a decade. I've seen basically everything that he does. This is some of the best. This is what I have stuck with. You'll notice that over the decade, the traders have followed me. I don't do a lot of changing. I don't do a lot of adding indicators. I'm not out here to reinvent the wheel. I find the stuff that works, and then I work on myself and my execution, and that will take you far.
Yeah, and
then as
so
far
Casey,
as go ahead, David.
Yeah, so I was just saying, KCP's asking, do the lines show up at various time intervals so that you can use them to plan out, options trades with spreads? And yeah, absolutely. That's a big key to what we're doing. So with that Caterpillar, right, that tree line that you saw, it doesn't matter if you're on a 1 minute chart. It doesn't matter if you're on a weekly chart. It doesn't matter if you're on a point and figure chart, a Renko chart, If your platform supports indicators overlaid on volume profile charts. It doesn't matter what you use, those levels are going to be in the same spot. And that's why, like I said, I was able to have my butterfly sitting at 245 in Caterpillar and take it off that day. It made that high right there. And even though Henry was doing it with outright calls, right, same trade, he took it off at pretty much the same spot. So yeah, that's you've nailed it. You got it. They are there so that we can plan ahead of time with that knowledge and structure trades around them.
And another thing that I will say I think is a distinct benefit of what we're going to be doing is that you get the mind of both of us, right? And a lot of what you're doing otherwise, you just kind of have one person that's teaching their approach to this. This is really something that David and I collaborate on every single day. So we've been structuring that Caterpillar, days ahead of time. When it got into it, we were on the same page. And when you've got, both of us studying the same stuff and seeing things in the same way, it's going to tend to be more successful. Lorna says, I've been referring to you as the Voodoo twins. I like that. I will take that as a compliment. It is available as a plugin on Thinkorswim. Thinkorswim, probably my primary platform for charting. TradeStation is very good too, but I do, to me, the options trading in Thinkorswim is so much easier than TradeStation, and that's part of why I've, dedicated my focus to that platform.
Yeah. So Paul's asking, for the course in live trading, are we going to spend significant time going over how to combine Voodoo with the Squeeze Pro and other simpler indicators? So we are definitely going to be talking about some combinations with the Squeeze. There are several dedicated setups that are specifically related to the Squeeze in the live or not in the strategy portion of the class. We've really tried to limit it to that. It is free on Toss. It's available on a bunch of other platforms, right? And we didn't want to go into, Henry and I use lots of others, and we will show them to you in the live trading and how we combine them. We're going to talk about some general strategies for combining with other stuff, right, in the strategy class. But this is not going to be a class where you need to have other premium indicators and that you've needed to purchase the Ready Aim Fire Pro. We're mostly going to be looking at the classic Squeeze, not the Squeeze Pro, although you can use the Squeeze Pro for more setups, right? So that's how we've thought about it. A lot of it will be very Voodoo focused in terms of talking about how you use it to find spots to trade to, spots to trade from, and to determine the trend on the way and use the way it behaves at different Voodoo lines to determine which strategy to use. And within that, you can use lots of other indicators to help improve the way you see the action, right? But we're going to give you guidance on how to incorporate those other things that help you into this, and the only thing really that's going to be really woven in tightly is going to be the classic Squeeze.
Yeah, you say I'm fascinated by Elliott wave theory, but I'm mostly lost while precisely calling out the future points. There's going to be no better resource for you to try, right? I'm not going to guarantee anything, but stick with it for 3 months, right? I have every confidence that you'll feel great about this when you finish the course and the live trading, But the truth of the matter is, to become really versed, you're going to need to stick with it, have some discipline over a couple of months. But, write back to me 3 months from today and see if you feel more confident with this. And I feel very confident that you will. So
yeah. So Steve, if you get the Voodoo lines and you don't want to continue to get the stock updates, you will continue to get updates to the levels for the indices, the index ETFs, right? Things like SPY, Q, QQ, IWM, right? Futures, Forex, and now crypto, right? Cool. So I think we're getting to the end of the questions. I see a lot of you saying you're joining us, and I know I speak for Henry as well when we say we are grateful that you let us spend our time working on developing this stuff, because we have just a lot of fun doing it and are looking forward to sharing it with you all. Henry, I don't know if you have stuff to wrap up or if you've caught any questions that I missed.
At this point, I believe we've addressed pretty much every possible question that we could in regards to how helpful these are going to be. If you're on the fence about it, I do encourage you to call into the office. They can work with you. They can try to give you more insight into what David and I are trying to accomplish. And there again, I think at the end of it, you'll be glad you took the plunge. So with that being said, again, the link for that up there available in the top left if you want to click it. Otherwise, you can just access it in your browser from slimprotrading.com/levels. Otherwise, thanks again for being here this evening. You guys have a great rest of your night, and I hope to see you in the options room tomorrow.